If you can't control your baby, maybe first class isn't for people like you. Carla Reynolds's voice sliced through the quiet hum of StarPulse Airways, Flight 392 like a blade. Every head in the first-class cabin turned instantly. Dr. Aisha Bennett froze in her seat. Her 8-month-old son Caleb cradled tightly against her chest, his tiny cries muffled against her blouse. The words burned deeper than the tone itself, but before she could respond, Carla leaned closer, her expression twisted with irritation. And then it happened. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin. Carla, a senior flight attendant with over a decade of experience, had just slapped Aisha across the face. Passengers gasped audibly. Someone whispered, "Did she just hit her?" Phones came out instantly, cameras switching on, fingers trembling to record. Caleb's cry rose to a sharp wail, his tiny fists clutching his mother's collar as if even he sensed the injustice of the moment. Before we go deeper into this story, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if this story moves you, like and subscribe for more powerful stories. Now, back to the story. For a moment, Aisha couldn't process what had just happened. Her cheek burned, her breath caught in her throat, and her heart pounded against her ribs. Around her, an entire cabin sat frozen, staring in disbelief, as if time itself had stopped. Aisha was no stranger to pressure. She was one of the top neurosurgeons in Atlanta. But this was different. She wasn't in an operating room. She wasn't holding surgical tools. She was holding her child, her dignity. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke, calm but firm. "You hit me while I'm holding my baby." Carla's jaw clenched. "Ma'am, this is first class. There are standards here. Your baby is disturbing our premium passengers," she snapped, her voice dripping with contempt. Behind Aisha, Evelyn Harper, a wealthy passenger in pearls, chimed in loudly. "She's right. Some of us paid for peace and quiet." Phones were recording now from every angle. In seat 2C, Mia Torres, a 22-year-old travel vlogger with over 500,000 TikTok followers, whispered to her camera, "Guys, you won't believe this. This flight attendant just slapped a black mom in first class. I'm live streaming. Stay tuned." Within minutes, her live stream surged past 20,000 viewers. Comments flooding in. "Sue her! Where's the captain? This is racism, plain and simple." Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the cockpit, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying himself with authority. "What's going on here?" he demanded, scanning the cabin. Carla jumped to explain first. "Sir, she's causing a disturbance, refusing to control her crying baby," she said, pointing directly at Aisha. The captain didn't even ask for Aisha's side. "Ma'am, if you can't maintain order, we'll have to escort you off this flight," he said firmly. Aisha's breath caught again. "Escort me off? For what? For holding my son while he cries? That's not a disturbance. That's being a mother," she said, her voice steady but laced with fire. Caleb whimpered softly, his tiny fingers gripping her blouse. "Ma'am, we have other passengers to consider," the captain replied curtly, motioning to the two federal air marshals, Agent Carter and Agent Nguyen, seated nearby. They stood slowly, hands resting near their belts. The tension in the cabin was thick, unbearable. Vibrating between shock and outrage, Mia whispered into her phone, "Guys, they're about to drag her off the plane. This is insane." Passengers started murmuring, some siding with Carla, others defending Aisha. Jordan Lee, a tech entrepreneur seated in 1B, spoke up sharply. "She has every right to be here. That's her seat. You don't touch a mother holding her baby. This is unacceptable." Evelyn rolled her eyes dramatically. "Some of us actually work hard to be here," she said, her voice deliberately loud. Aisha's patience cracked, but her composure held. Years of operating on the edge of life and death had trained her for moments like this. "I'm not leaving this seat," she said firmly, staring directly at the captain. "And neither is my son." The air marshals stepped closer, tension radiating off them. Caleb's cries filled the silence, a painful soundtrack to the injustice unfolding. "Phones kept recording," Mia whispered into her mic. "Comment where you're watching from. We're at 30,000 live viewers now." Carla folded her arms smugly, confident she had the upper hand. But Aisha took a deep breath, reached into her handbag, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved calmly, decisively. She dialed a number, put the phone on speaker, and said softly, "Nathan, it's happening again." The cabin fell silent at the mention of his name. Nathan Bennett, CEO of StarPulse Airways, billionaire, owner of the very airline they were sitting on. A deep, steady voice came through the speaker, resonant and calm but carrying authority. "Aisha." "What happened?" She inhaled sharply, steadying her voice. "Your flight attendant just slapped me. In front of our son." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Carla's face drained of color. The captain's confident stance faltered, his eyes darting nervously toward the air marshals. Nathan's voice deepened, ice in every syllable. "Stay seated. Do not move. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead. Aisha locked her phone, her expression calm, almost serene. Caleb hiccuped softly against her shoulder, unaware that his cry had sparked a storm bigger than anyone could control. Mia whispered into her live stream. "Guys, did you hear that? Nathan Bennett, her husband, owns the airline." The comments exploded instantly. Viewers doubled, then tripled, within minutes. The live stream soared past 60,000 people watching in real time. The cabin buzzed with whispers, phones pinging with notifications, the weight of realization settling like a storm cloud ready to break. Carla's lips trembled as she finally stepped back. But the damage was done. Aisha's dignity had been challenged. The cameras were rolling, and the entire world was about to witness what would happen next. The cabin of Flight 392 buzzed like a storm ready to erupt. Carla Reynolds stood frozen near the galley, her once confident posture collapsing under the weight of what she'd just heard. Nathan Bennett, CEO, owner of the airline. Aisha sat calmly in seat 2A, her son Caleb resting against her chest. Tiny hiccups breaking the tense silence. Cameras were still rolling, live stream still climbing past 70,000 viewers and counting. Mia Torres whispered into her phone. "Guys, Nathan Bennett is on his way right now. Things are about to get crazy. Stay tuned." Evelyn Harper, the wealthy passenger in pearls, scoffed loudly and muttered just enough for nearby passengers to hear. People like her always think they're special. Owning stock doesn't mean owning respect. Jordan Lee, sitting across from her, snapped back sharply. "That's her husband. And yes, he does own this airline, so maybe start respecting people." Evelyn. The tension in first class was a living thing, pressing against every passenger, suffocating in its weight. Downstairs, chaos brewed at Hartsfield-Jackson's private terminal. Nathan Bennett's black Rolls-Royce Phantom screeched to a stop just outside gate C-23. His security team moved first, clearing a path as he stepped out. Tall and commanding in a tailored Navy suit, Nathan wasn't just a CEO. He carried himself like a man who built empires and protected what was his. Every step radiated quiet authority, and those who saw him instantly understood. This wasn't going to be handled quietly. David Park, StarPulse's head of legal, rushed beside him, clutching a leather folder, whispering updates as they walked briskly. "We've confirmed multiple live streams. Public sentiment's turning fast. Hashtag Justice for Aisha is already trending. Carla Reynolds identified. FAA notified. Media vans are outside." Nathan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any words. Back in the cabin, Captain Robert Hayes retreated to the cockpit, pacing furiously, muttering to himself. He had 25 years of experience, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. "Why didn't she just de-escalate?" he whispered angrily, meaning Carla. But deep down, he knew his own role wasn't innocent. He'd backed her without question, without hearing Aisha's side, and now, the consequences were spiraling beyond control. Meanwhile, Mia's live stream had surged past 12,000 viewers. Her chat box overflowed. "Fire Carla now! Boycott StarPulse until justice is served." "Where's the CEO?" Jordan leaned toward Aisha, speaking softly. "Are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" Aisha shook her head gently, her composure unshaken. "He's already coming," she said calmly, her voice low but steady. "And when he gets here, things will change, within minutes." The sliding glass doors of the private terminal burst open. Nathan Bennett entered with his security detail, his presence commanding silence in the boarding area. Passengers and crew alike turned, instinctively stepping back, without a word. Nathan walked directly toward gate C-23, his stride measured, his face unreadable. Every camera in the terminal tracked his movement. Journalists scrambled to get angles. Mia whispered into her live stream. "He's here." Nathan Bennett just walked into the terminal. "Look at him. Guys, this is about to explode." Inside the aircraft, Carla clutched the edge of the galley counter, her hands trembling slightly, but her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. "I didn't do anything wrong," she muttered to another flight attendant, Sarah Bennett, who shook her head nervously. "You slapped a passenger." "Carla," Sarah whispered back, "and her baby. On camera. Everyone saw it." Carla's face flushed deep red. She wanted to argue, but no words came. 2 minutes later, the aircraft door opened. Nathan stepped inside first, followed by David Park and 3 security personnel. The shift in energy was immediate. First class went silent, except for Caleb's soft breathing against Aisha's shoulder. Nathan's gaze swept the cabin, controlled, deliberate, taking in every detail, every expression, every phone still recording. He stopped directly in front of Carla. "Are you Carla Reynolds?" he asked, his voice low, calm, but carrying the weight of authority. Carla straightened her posture, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Yes, sir," she said, trying to sound composed. Nathan didn't blink. "You slapped my wife while she was holding my son in first class on my airline." The silence was suffocating. No one dared move. Carla swallowed hard, her confidence shattering under his gaze. "Sir, she was disturbing passengers," she stammered weakly. Nathan's voice didn't rise, but the quiet intensity behind his words was sharper than any shout. "You don't touch a passenger, ever, and you don't humiliate my family, ever." Carla's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Nathan turned slightly, addressing Captain Hayes, who had just emerged from the cockpit. "And you," Nathan said, his tone icy, "you supported this?" The captain hesitated, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "Sir, I was trying to maintain order," he replied, his voice wavering. Nathan stared at him for a long, quiet moment before responding. "You didn't maintain order. You escalated chaos." David Park stepped forward, whispering something into Nathan's ear while handing him a folder. Nathan flipped through documents quickly, his jaw tightening with each page. He turned back to Carla. "Effective immediately," he said coldly. "You're relieved of duty. Surrender your badge." Gasps rippled through the cabin as Carla's trembling hand unpinned her name tag, placing it on the nearest seat without a word. Her shoulders slumped, her bravado gone. Mia whispered into her live stream. "You guys, Carla just got fired. On the spot. You're witnessing history." Comments exploded instantly. Finally, accountability, respect for Aisha. The live stream crossed 200,000 viewers. Nathan then crouched slightly, his expression softening as he turned to Aisha. "I'm here," he said quietly, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. Aisha looked up at him, her composure unbroken, though her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. "I told you I'd handle it," she whispered. He nodded, leaning closer so only she could hear. "This isn't just about us anymore. This changes everything," rising to his full height. Nathan addressed the entire cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice steady, projecting authority without effort. "What happened here today will never happen again. Not on my watch, not on this airline." His words resonated through the cabin like a promise carved in stone. Meanwhile, outside the plane, news alerts lit up across the country. CEO Nathan Bennett confronts flight crew after racial discrimination incident. #Justice for Aisha, trending nationwide. CNN, ABC, and Fox News crews rushed toward Gate C-23. Social media exploded within 40 minutes. The video of Carla slapping Aisha had surpassed 5 million views. As Nathan escorted Aisha off the plane, security forming a protective wall around them. Mia's live stream hit 35,000 viewers. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into her phone. "This is bigger than a flight. This is history in the making." Passengers applauded softly as Aisha walked past, still holding Caleb, who had finally drifted into peaceful sleep. Back inside the terminal, Nathan ordered an emergency board meeting to be convened within the hour. David Park made the calls as the private conference room filled with executives, legal advisors, and FAA investigators. Nathan's first words cut through the noise like steel. "Today, StarPulse failed its passengers. That ends now." And as news helicopters circled above Hartsfield-Jackson, the world watched, waited, and wondered how one mother's dignity, challenged in Seat 2A, was about to change the future of air travel forever. The glass walls of StarPulse Airways executive boardroom overlooked the runway at Hartsfield-Jackson, where Flight 392 still sat at Gate C-23, frozen in time like an exhibit under investigation. Inside, tension pressed against every corner of the room. Nathan Bennett stood at the head of the sleek mahogany table, his navy suit still sharp, but his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed with controlled fury. Aisha sat quietly beside him, holding Caleb in her lap, his tiny hands clutching her blouse as if sensing the storm around him. Around the table, 12 executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their whispers dying as Nathan raised his hand for silence. "Before we start," Nathan said, his voice low but resonant, "I want every person in this room to understand one thing. What happened today will redefine this company, this industry, and every single one of your careers." He paused, letting his words sink in. Cameras were recording. The entire meeting was being live-streamed to nearly 90,000 viewers after the public demanded transparency. David Park, StarPulse's head of legal, stood at Nathan's right with a thick binder in his hand, his voice steady as he summarized the situation. "We have 6 verified live streams capturing Carla Reynolds striking Dr. Bennett. #Justice for Aisha has reached 12 million views in 3 hours. Mainstream media outlets are running the footage non-stop. FAA investigators are requesting immediate access to crew logs and passenger statements. CNN, ABC, and the New York Times are demanding comment." Across the table, Margaret Evans, StarPulse's Senior Vice President of Operations, cleared her throat. "Nathan, we should issue a holding statement, something neutral until we confirm facts internally." Nathan's head snapped toward her, his voice sharp but controlled. "We don't need to confirm facts. Margaret, millions of people just watched it happen live. There's no neutral position when the world has already seen injustice." The words hung heavy in the air. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged him. Laura Simmons, the FAA's lead investigator, entered the room, a slim folder in her hand, Her calm demeanor carried authority. "Mr. Bennett, we've reviewed the footage," she said. "From our perspective, this isn't just a personnel issue. This is a systemic failure. You're not just facing public backlash. You're looking at federal scrutiny." Nathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then let's cooperate fully," he replied. "StarPulse will be the model for how airlines should respond. No excuses, no delays." While the board debated protocols, Mia Torres's TikTok livestream continued outside the conference room. By now, she had become an unintentional journalist, reporting live updates to nearly 500,000 viewers. "Guys, Nathan Bennett just started an emergency board meeting with FAA investigators in the room," she whispered into her camera. "We're literally watching aviation history unfold right now." Her chat exploded with comments. "Accountability matters. Carla deserves jail time. Protect Aisha. Back inside." Captain Robert Hayes entered quietly. His once proud posture diminished. Nathan's gaze locked on him instantly. "Captain Hayes," Nathan began slowly, "you've been with StarPulse 25 years. Explain to this board why you supported Carla's actions." Hayes swallowed hard, his voice faltering. "Sir, I believed she was maintaining order in the cabin. I didn't realize she'd escalated it so severely." Aisha turned to face him, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You didn't even ask me what happened. You didn't look at me. You assumed." Silence spread through the room like wildfire. Hayes lowered his head. "You're right, ma'am," he said softly. "I failed you." Nathan didn't reply immediately. He simply let the weight of those words settle, the quiet condemnation filling the air. Suddenly, David Park's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening. "Nathan," he said, turning the display toward him. "NBC just reported that 5 major advocacy groups are calling for a nationwide boycott unless StarPulse responds decisively within 24 hours. Nathan's expression didn't change. "Then they'll get their response in one." He stood, shoulders squared, and addressed the entire board, his voice steady, commanding, effective immediately. "Carla Reynolds is terminated. Her badge and credentials are revoked. Captain Hayes, you are suspended pending investigation." Hayes nodded silently, accepting his fate. "Furthermore," Nathan continued, "we're launching an independent audit of every passenger discrimination complaint filed in the last 5 years. Full transparency. Every report goes public." Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret Evans leaned forward sharply. "Nathan, that could expose us to lawsuits," she warned. Nathan met her gaze without blinking. "If fixing systemic discrimination costs us lawsuits." "Then so be it," Laura Simmons interjected, nodding. "Mr. Bennett, that's the right move. But I'd recommend we formalize reforms now. The FAA is considering making this incident the catalyst for federal policy." Nathan turned to her and said firmly, "Then we'll lead the way. StarPulse will set the standard. I want a passenger bill of rights drafted and approved before the week is out." Aisha placed a calming hand on Nathan's arm. She hadn't spoken much during the meeting, but now her voice carried across the room, steady and deliberate. "This isn't just about me," she said softly. "It's about every parent traveling with a child who has ever been judged, every family who's been treated like they don't belong." She glanced around the table, meeting each executive's eyes in turn. "We have a chance to change something bigger than StarPulse. Please, don't waste it." Her words struck deeper than any data or report could. Even Margaret, who had been skeptical moments ago, nodded slowly. "She's right," she admitted quietly. Outside, cameras flashed as Carla Reynolds was escorted from the terminal by federal air marshals, her face pale, her once proud stride replaced by a hesitant shuffle. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust toward her, but she kept her head down. The video went viral within minutes. Hashtags multiplying, hashtag Justice for Aisha, Hashtag accountability now. Hashtag reform air travel. Meanwhile, Jordan Lee, the tech entrepreneur from Seat 1B, began posting detailed accounts of the incident to a major aviation forum. His posts quickly gained traction among frequent flyers and industry insiders. This wasn't a one-off. He wrote, "This is the symptom of a culture problem inside our airlines." Within hours, aviation blogs picked up his analysis, amplifying the call for reform. Mia Torres, still live streaming, received a wave of donations from viewers thanking her for exposing the truth. Through teary eyes, she said into her camera, "I came on this flight for a vacation. I didn't expect to become a voice for something bigger than myself. But if it helps Aisha, if it helps families like hers, then it's worth it." By nightfall, Nathan's emergency measures began taking shape. StarPulse announced a sweeping new policy called the Dignity Protocol, requiring 50 hours of mandatory bias training for all employees, strict penalties for discriminatory conduct, and real-time passenger complaint tracking accessible to the public. "Every family belongs," the new slogan read, displayed on screens across every StarPulse terminal nationwide. News outlets scrambled to cover the announcement, calling it the most aggressive airline reform in modern history. Analysts predicted lawsuits, but Wall Street reacted unexpectedly. StarPulse's stock climbed 7% overnight as investors praised Nathan's bold leadership and transparency. By the end of the day, hashtag Dignity Protocol was trending globally, reaching 32 countries in under 6 hours. FAA officials confirmed they would use StarPulse's model as a framework for potential federal legislation. For the first time in aviation history, a single passenger incident had triggered a systemic reckoning, and Aisha's quiet strength had become the spark behind it all. But Nathan knew this wasn't the end. Outside the boardroom, protests were forming, advocacy groups were mobilizing, and Carla's legal team had already hinted at a wrongful termination lawsuit. The war wasn't over. This was just the beginning. As Nathan left the boardroom with Aisha and Caleb by his side, he paused briefly in the hallway, looking through the glass wall at the grounded aircraft where everything began. He took a deep breath and said softly, almost to himself, "Seat 2A. Changed everything." By the next morning, StarPulse Airways wasn't just trending. It had become the center of a national firestorm. News anchors across CNN, ABC, and Fox led with the same headline, "Black Mom Slapped on Flight 392. Airline CEO's Wife Sparks Industry Reckoning." Every detail of the incident was being dissected, from Carla Reynolds' slap to Captain Hayes' failure to intervene, to Nathan Bennett's powerful on-the-spot confrontation. Millions had already seen Mia Torres' live stream, which had crossed 23 million views overnight. Clips replayed across every platform, with comments pouring in by the second. "She deserves justice. Fire every last one of them. This is why we need change." Aisha sat quietly in the corner of Nathan's private office at StarPulse headquarters, her laptop open, Caleb playing softly in his bassinet beside her. On screen, notifications flooded in from advocacy groups, journalists, and civil rights attorneys requesting interviews. She scrolled silently, her expression calm. But her silence was weighted. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was strategizing. Nathan entered the office briskly, his navy suit immaculate, but his eyes showing signs of fatigue after nearly 20 hours without rest. David Park followed closely behind, holding a tablet full of reports. "We have 3 lawsuits incoming already," David said flatly. One from Carla's legal team alleging wrongful termination, one from a first-class passenger claiming emotional trauma, and another from a flight attendants union accusing us of bias in disciplinary actions. Nathan barely flinched. "Good," he said calmly. "Let them file. We'll win every one of them." David hesitated before continuing. "Nathan, the FAA has escalated," Laura Simmons called. They're recommending an emergency federal hearing to discuss airline discrimination policies. They want you and Aisha to testify next week in Washington." Aisha glanced up at Nathan, meeting his gaze. "Then we go," she said softly. "This isn't just our fight anymore." Nathan nodded. "Exactly. We're not defending ourselves. We're setting the standard." Outside the glass walls of Nathan's office, StarPulse's headquarters buzzed like a war room. Public relations executives crowded around screens, watching breaking news alerts, crafting statements in real time. Engineers were redesigning passenger complaint tracking systems. Legal advisors were reviewing every single discrimination-related report filed in the past decade. And HR was scheduling emergency meetings across every division, in every terminal nationwide. Brand new digital signs appeared overnight. "Every family belongs. Respect first." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Passengers noticed. Social media flooded with photos of the new StarPulse signage, captioned with hashtags like #DignityProtocol and #RespectFirst. Meanwhile, Carla Reynolds, now infamous worldwide, made her first public statement through her attorney. "My client regrets the misunderstanding aboard Flight 392. The statement read, but strongly denies any wrongdoing. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Within an hour, the statement had over 100,000 angry replies across platforms. "Misunderstanding? We saw the video. There's no misunderstanding when you slap a mother holding her baby." Even other flight attendants began speaking out, anonymously submitting testimonies to blogs, claiming Carla had a history of targeting families of color and creating confrontations. The narrative shifted from an isolated incident to a systemic exposure. And suddenly, StarPulse wasn't the only airline under scrutiny. Aviation forums exploded with passengers sharing similar stories across multiple airlines. Families removed for crying babies, travelers profiled for security checks, and executives ignoring bias complaints. Journalists began calling it the Flight 392 effect. The Department of Transportation announced it was opening a broader investigation into discriminatory practices across the entire airline industry, citing Flight 392 as the catalyst. Back in Nathan's office, Mia Torres stood nervously at the edge of the room, holding her phone. The livestream queen who had unintentionally exposed the incident was now facing overwhelming attention herself. I don't know what to do," she admitted softly. "I woke up to 1.3 million followers. Documentaries want to sign me. People are calling me an activist." Aisha looked up from her laptop, offering Mia a small, reassuring smile. "You became a witness, Mia," she said gently. "And sometimes, witnesses become voices. Use it wisely." Mia nodded slowly, her expression shifting from fear to resolve. "Then I'm with you," she said firmly. "I'll use my platform to push for real change." Nathan turned to his assistant, ordering preparations for an emergency press conference at noon by the time the cameras rolled. Over 40 news outlets were live, and more than 3 million viewers tuned in online. Standing at the podium, Nathan's voice carried steady authority. "Yesterday, StarPulse failed one of our own," he began, his hand resting lightly on Aisha's shoulder. "But we will not hide from this failure. We will confront it. We are implementing the Dignity Protocol immediately. 50 hours of mandatory bias training for every employee. From executives to crew, real-time complaint tracking will go public. Passengers will have transparent, enforceable rights. And this isn't just about StarPulse. We are calling on every airline in this country to adopt these same reforms. If they don't, we'll make sure Washington makes them." The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions over one another. "Mr. Bennett, do you believe this will restore trust?" Nathan leaned forward, his voice calm but resolute. "This isn't about restoring trust," he said firmly. "It's about earning it. One policy, one flight, one family at a time." As the press conference ended, Aisha stepped briefly to the microphone. The room fell silent as her voice, soft but powerful, filled the air. "Dignity isn't a privilege," she said, her gaze steady, unflinching. "It's a right, and we will fight for every passenger, every parent, every child who has ever been made to feel like they didn't belong." Her words went viral instantly, racking up 10 million views in under an hour across the nation. Her statement was replayed in headlines. "Dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right." Meanwhile, Evelyn Harper, the wealthy passenger from first class who had supported Carla, faced her own backlash after a video surfaced of her earlier comments about people like her. She issued a public apology on her social media, but the damage to her reputation was irreversible. Jordan Lee, on the other hand, became an unexpected hero. His detailed posts on aviation forums were now being shared by major journalists, earning him a segment on Good Morning America as an advocate for equitable air travel. That evening, Nathan, Aisha, Mia, and David joined Laura Simmons from the FAA on a call with Senate aides drafting what they were already calling the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act, a bill inspired directly by Flight 392. "If we get this right," Laura said on the call, "this will change how airlines operate, not just in the U.S., but globally." Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion lining his face, but his resolve unshaken. "Then we'll get it right," he said simply. By nightfall, #Justice for Aisha had reached over 35 million mentions worldwide. Protesters gathered outside major airline terminals in Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York, holding signs reading, "Every family belongs and respect first," across cable networks. Opinion panels debated the deeper meaning behind the Flight 392 incident. Civil rights leaders compared it to historic moments of systemic exposure, calling it a turning point for equality in the skies. Aisha, however, remained quiet through most of the chaos. Late that night, sitting in the nursery rocking Caleb to sleep, she whispered softly to her son, "You'll never remember today, but the world will." Her phone buzzed on the side table. Another alert. Another trending headline. But she ignored it, focused instead on the tiny hand curled around her finger. Outside, Nathan stood on the balcony, overlooking Atlanta's skyline as news helicopters circled in the distance. David stepped beside him, handing him the latest analytics report. "We're leading the conversation globally," David said softly. "But the pressure's only going to build from here." Nathan exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the city lights. "Good," he said. "Let them watch. This isn't just about StarPulse anymore. We're going to rewrite the rules of this industry." But neither Nathan nor Aisha knew that the hardest fight was still ahead. Carla's legal team was preparing an aggressive countersuit. Competitor airlines were quietly lobbying Congress against the reforms Nathan demanded. And in Washington, powerful lobbyists were moving to weaken the proposed Passenger Dignity and Equity Act before it could even reach the Senate floor. The storm wasn't ending. It was only growing louder. The marble hallways of the U.S. Capitol echoed with the low murmur of voices as cameras flashed outside the Senate hearing room. It had been 7 days since the incident on Flight 392, and the entire nation was watching. The viral footage of Carla Reynolds slapping Dr. Aisha Bennett while she held baby Caleb had sparked outrage far beyond aviation. It became a national reckoning on dignity, bias, and accountability. Inside the packed chamber, rows of senators, FAA officials, airline executives, and reporters waited as Nathan Bennett, CEO of StarPulse Airways, entered with Aisha by his side. She wore a simple cream blouse and navy blazer, her poise effortless, her expression calm but unyielding. Nathan, in a tailored charcoal suit, carried himself with quiet authority, his presence commanding instant attention. Mia Torres sat 2 rows behind them, phone in hand, live streaming for nearly 2 million viewers worldwide, her chat scrolling faster than she could read. "Ladies and gentlemen," Senator Grace Mitchell began, gavel in hand, her voice ringing clearly across the chamber. "Today's hearing addresses systemic bias and passenger rights in the airline industry, triggered by the events of September 15th aboard StarPulse Flight 392. This is not an isolated incident. This is an inflection point." Her words carried weight, and the room fell silent. Nathan rose first, his tall frame steady as he approached the microphone. "On behalf of StarPulse Airways," he began, his deep voice resonant but measured, "I want to acknowledge our failure. My family was directly affected. Yes, but this is bigger than us. This is about every family who's ever felt unwelcome, every parent forced to apologize for having a crying child, every passenger judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. That ends today." The statement drew soft murmurs from the gallery, but Nathan wasn't finished. "That's why we launched the Dignity Protocol, mandatory 50-hour bias training for every employee, real-time public complaint tracking, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. But one airline fixing itself isn't enough. This industry needs reform. That's why we're here to support the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act." His words rippled through the chamber, echoing across live streams worldwide. Senator David Hargrove, known for his ties to the aviation lobby, leaned forward skeptically. "Mr. Bennett, with all due respect, implementing these reforms nationally could cost billions. Smaller airlines may not survive." Nathan didn't flinch. "Then they'll have to adapt or fail. Passenger dignity isn't negotiable." Gasps spread across the room at his bluntness. Next, Aisha rose, cradling her statement in one hand. The silence deepened instantly as she stepped to the microphone. Her voice was soft, yet every syllable carried power. "I'm not here today as a CEO's wife," she began. "I'm here as a mother, as a doctor, and as someone who has lived through systemic bias her entire life. On Flight 392, I wasn't treated like a passenger. I wasn't treated like a mother. I was treated like I didn't belong." She paused, her gaze steady, sweeping across the senators. "But I do belong. We all do. Dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right. And if this country can legislate passenger safety, it can legislate passenger respect." The room erupted into applause. Despite the gavel pounding to restore order, clips of her statement went viral instantly, Mia's livestream crossing 4 million concurrent viewers within minutes. Laura Simmons, the FAA's lead investigator, testified next, her findings damning. "Flight 392 is not an isolated case," she declared firmly. "Our data shows that passengers of color are 3 times more likely to face escalated conflict on airlines nationwide. The FAA supports the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act and urges Congress to act immediately." Outside the chamber, thousands gathered on the Capitol steps holding signs, "Every family belongs, respect first, and dignity is non-negotiable." The protests were peaceful, but massive, live-streamed by networks and personal phones alike, across social media, hashtags Justice for Aisha, hashtag Dignity Protocol, and hashtag FlyFair flooded timelines, creating a tidal wave of support. Airlines couldn't ignore the pressure. In response, Delta, United, and Horizon Airways each released statements pledging to review policies. Though many critics called the moves performative, StarPulse, by contrast, had already implemented sweeping reforms, earning both praise and envy across the industry. Inside, however, opposition mounted. Industry lobbyists whispered frantically to senators, warning of financial collapse, higher ticket prices, and union strikes if the act passed. Senator Hargrove pressed Aisha directly. "Dr. Bennett," he said, his tone cautious, "do you realize the potential economic disruption these mandates could cause?" Aisha looked at him without hesitation. "What's the cost of a passenger's dignity?" "Senator?" she asked softly. The question hung in the air, impossible to refute. Meanwhile, Mia provided real-time updates to millions of viewers. "Guys, you won't believe this," she whispered into her phone. "Senators are being confronted right now by protesters outside. We're watching history unfold." Her audience had ballooned past 6 million live viewers globally, and donations for passenger advocacy groups crossed $1.2 million within hours. Jordan Lee, the tech entrepreneur from Seat 1B, testified next, presenting data he'd collected from aviation forums and customer surveys. "This isn't just about one airline," he explained, his voice steady and analytical. "This is about a culture across the industry that prioritizes profit over people. StarPulse is showing that dignity and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. They're inseparable." His report received thunderous applause, amplified by viewers online. As the hearing stretched into its fourth hour, tensions escalated when Carla Reynolds' legal team requested to speak. The chamber buzzed as Carla herself appeared on screen via video feed, her expression rigid, eyes cold. "I've been vilified unfairly," she said sharply. "This is a witch hunt against me." The reaction was swift and brutal. Senators frowned, reporters scribbled furiously, and Mia's chat exploded with angry comments. "No accountability, gaslighting 101, fire her again." Carla's attempt to defend herself backfired spectacularly, cementing her as a symbol of systemic failure rather than an individual scapegoat. By day's end, the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act passed the Senate committee with a 10-2 vote, sending it to the full chamber. Outside, the crowds erupted into cheers, chanting Aisha's name as she stepped onto the Capitol steps, Caleb resting peacefully in Nathan's arms. Mia turned her camera toward the family, her voice trembling. "Guys, this is it. History, right here, right now." News alerts flooded phones across the country. Passenger Dignity and Equity Act moves forward after emotional Senate hearing. Stocks of major airlines dipped briefly, but StarPulse rose 12% by close, investors betting on its leadership in reform. Editorials from the Washington Post, the New York Times, and even the Wall Street Journal praised Nathan's transparency and Aisha's courage, calling the couple the unlikely leaders of an aviation revolution. That night, back at their Washington hotel, Aisha sat on the edge of the bed, rocking Caleb gently, while Nathan stood by the window overlooking the Capitol dome. David Park entered quietly, holding a thick folder. "Nathan," he said softly, "we've received word. 4 competing airlines have just formed a coalition to lobby against the bill. They'll try to block it in the House." Nathan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the skyline. "Then we'll fight harder," he said calmly. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every passenger, every flight, every family." Aisha looked up, her voice steady but soft. "And we won't stop," she said, "until dignity flies with everyone." Nathan turned, meeting her eyes, and for a brief moment, exhaustion gave way to quiet determination. But outside their suite, forces were already mobilizing. Lobbyists, unions, and rival CEOs were preparing their counterattack. The next battle wouldn't be in Atlanta, or even the Senate. It would be in the court of public opinion, where billions of dollars and decades of entrenched practices were at stake. The storm of Flight 392 had shaken the skies, but the war for systemic change had only just begun. 3 weeks after the historic Senate hearing, StarPulse Airways had become the epicenter of a global movement. The Passenger Dignity and Equity Act was gaining unstoppable momentum, dominating every news cycle, trending daily across social media, and sparking nationwide protests demanding systemic reform. Outside StarPulse headquarters in Atlanta, thousands gathered holding signs reading "Every family belongs," "Dignity is a right," and "Respect first." News helicopters hovered above, capturing images that would lead broadcasts around the world. Inside the sleek glass tower, Nathan Bennett stood at the head of a long conference table, flanked by Aisha on his right and David Park on his left, as his executive team prepared for war, not with their customers, but with their competitors. David placed a thick binder on the table. "We have confirmation," he said gravely. "Delta, United, Horizon Airways, and North Star Aviation have formed a joint lobbying group. They've pooled over $300 million to fight the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act in Congress." He paused, scanning the tense faces in the room. "They're calling it the Freedom to Fly Coalition. But make no mistake, they want to kill this bill before it reaches the House floor." Nathan leaned forward slowly, resting his clasped hands on the table, his expression calm but sharp. "Then they've just declared war," he said quietly. Aisha adjusted Caleb's blanket in her lap, her composure unbroken despite the tension. "They can spend $300 million, she said softly, "but they can't outspend the truth. We have the people, we have the footage, and we have every family that's ever been humiliated at 30,000 feet. Her words carried a quiet weight, silencing the room for a moment. At that exact time, on the other side of Washington, airline lobbyists were gathered in a private suite at the Jefferson Hotel. Their strategy was aggressive: discredit StarPulse, attack Nathan personally, and frame the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act as overregulation that threatens consumer choice. A leaked memo revealed their plan to fund media campaigns, hire influencers, and even create misleading studies claiming the reforms would raise ticket prices by 35% within hours of the leak. The hashtag Freedom to Fly Exposed was trending worldwide, and the backlash was immediate. "If respecting passengers raises prices," one viral tweet read, "then the airlines have been undercharging for human decency." Meanwhile, Carla Reynolds' legal troubles deepened. Once considered a rogue employee, her case now symbolized the broader systemic failures of the airline industry. Federal prosecutors, pressured by mounting evidence and public outrage, charged Carla with assault on a passenger and endangering a minor. News footage of Carla arriving at the courthouse, flanked by lawyers, avoiding cameras, dominated primetime coverage. Her trial date was set, and the stakes were enormous, not just for her, but for every airline defending outdated policies. Mia Torres, once a travel vlogger, had transformed into a national activist almost overnight. With nearly 4.8 million followers now, she launched a campaign called #FlyFair, raising over $3.2 million to support passengers filing discrimination claims. Her viral videos breaking down aviation policies reached audiences mainstream journalists couldn't. One clip of Mia explaining passengers' rights racked up 28 million views in 2 days, forcing the FAA to release a public statement clarifying existing protections. Mia was invited to appear on Good Morning America, CNN, and even testified alongside Aisha before the House committee. "I was just live streaming one flight," Mia told the cameras. "I never expected to become part of this story, but now we all are." Inside StarPulse, reforms moved at lightning speed under Nathan's leadership. The Dignity Protocol expanded beyond bias training. StarPulse became the first airline in the world to install real-time bias detection technology, AI-powered systems that monitored crew-passenger interactions through secure audio streams, flagging potential discriminatory language for supervisor review. Passenger satisfaction ratings surged, and within 30 days, StarPulse saw an unprecedented 18% increase in ticket sales. As families of color specifically chose StarPulse over competitors, analysts across Wall Street called it the most successful corporate turnaround in modern aviation history. But the fight was far from over. Congress scheduled an emergency vote on the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act after intense public pressure. The House chamber was packed the day of the debate. Protesters surrounded the Capitol, waving signs, chanting, and live streaming the moment to tens of millions worldwide. Nathan and Aisha sat in the gallery, Caleb quietly sleeping in her arms. as the bill faced its fiercest opposition yet. Airline lobbyists funded a last-minute media blitz claiming the bill would bankrupt the industry. Nathan whispered to David, "If this fails here, they'll double their attacks in the courts." During the session, Congressman Anthony Walsh, long aligned with the airline lobby, attempted to derail the bill. "This overreach will destroy competition," he thundered, waving a stack of papers. But Congresswoman Renee Carter from Georgia countered fiercely, holding up a photo of Aisha clutching Caleb in seat 2A. "Competition means nothing," she said sharply. "If it comes at the cost of dignity." Her words went viral instantly, reigniting national passion and triggering another surge of online activism. As the debate raged, Aisha scrolled through Mia's live-stream chat on her phone. Thousands of comments from viewers poured in by the second, watching from Chicago, streaming live from London. "We're with you, Aisha." Her quiet smile returned as she whispered softly to Caleb, "The world's watching, baby, and they care." Hours later, the House voted 312 in favor, 123 against. The Passenger Dignity and Equity Act passed. Cheers erupted inside the chamber. Outside, tens of thousands of protesters roared in unison, their chants echoing across the Capitol steps. Mia's live stream shattered records with over 8.7 million live viewers, making it the single most watched non-sporting event in TikTok history. Yet the victory was only the beginning. The act mandated industry-wide reforms, transparent complaint tracking, mandatory sensitivity training, passenger rights education, and severe penalties for discriminatory conduct. FAA Administrator Laura Simmons announced that the new framework would go into effect immediately and confirmed that international aviation bodies had begun discussions to adopt similar policies globally. Within weeks, Canada, the UK, and Australia pledged to implement their own versions of the Dignity Protocol, inspired directly by StarPulse's reforms. But not everyone celebrated. Rival airlines doubled down on their opposition, funding lawsuits to challenge the act's constitutionality. Wall Street analysts warned of market turbulence, predicting fare hikes and pilot shortages. News segments debated endlessly whether Nathan's reforms were visionary or reckless. Nathan, however, remained focused. "Change isn't comfortable," he told a CNN anchor during a primetime interview. But comfort never rewrote history. Meanwhile, Jordan Lee became a central figure in reshaping aviation culture. His investigative reports on hidden bias within airline hiring practices went viral, leading to a Justice Department inquiry into discriminatory recruitment policies across multiple airlines. "This isn't about punishing one employee," Jordan said in an exclusive 60-minute segment. "This is about dismantling an entire structure that allowed prejudice to operate unchecked for decades." By the end of the month, the impact was undeniable. Complaints of in-flight discrimination dropped 41% across the industry. StarPulse's stock rose another 22%. And Nathan was named Business Leader of the Year by Forbes for turning a public crisis into a global movement. Aisha was honored with the NAACP's Courage Award. Her acceptance speech watched live by over 10 million people worldwide. "I never wanted this spotlight," she said softly on stage, holding Caleb in her arms. "But if speaking up makes the skies safer for even one child, then it's worth it." Back in Atlanta, Nathan and Aisha returned home exhausted but resolute. Late that night, Nathan stood by the nursery window, watching the city lights while Caleb slept peacefully in his crib. Aisha joined him quietly, resting her head against his shoulder. "Do you realize what we've done?" she whispered. Nathan's eyes remained on the skyline. "Not yet," he said softly. "But the world does. Across oceans, governments debated adopting their own dignity protocols. StarPulse became the blueprint for an entirely new standard of air travel, reshaping policies in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Aisha's story, once a moment of humiliation in Seat 2A, had transformed into a catalyst for global reform. But Nathan knew this wasn't victory. It was a responsibility. Every reform we fight for here, he told his team the next day, sets the precedent for the next industry. Healthcare, housing, education. Dignity isn't just about flying, it's about living. The world was listening, and they weren't about to forget Flight 392, 2 years later. The world looked very different. The events aboard Flight 392 had become more than a viral moment. They had become a turning point in global aviation history. StarPulse Airways, once at the center of chaos, now stood as the gold standard for dignity-driven travel across the industry. Airlines had adopted sweeping reforms modeled after the Dignity Protocol. Transparent passenger complaint systems were now mandatory. Crew training included 50 hours of empathy and bias awareness modules, and real-time data monitoring ensured passengers were treated with fairness, regardless of race, income, or background. What began as a mother being humiliated in Seat 2A had transformed into a movement reshaping skies worldwide. Dr. Aisha Bennett, once just a passenger holding her crying baby, was now a global advocate for passenger rights. Her quiet strength during the confrontation became the heart of a powerful shift in culture. She founded the Family Travel Alliance, an organization helping families facing discrimination during air travel, and within 2 years, the alliance had resolved over 1,200 cases, winning 98% of settlements without stepping into court. Aisha's work earned her the NAACP Courage Award, and her keynote speech at Harvard Law School was streamed by millions around the globe. Dignity, she told the audience, her voice calm but commanding, isn't granted by policies, it's preserved by people. Laws change systems, but empathy changes hearts. Nathan Bennett, too, became more than a CEO under his leadership. StarPulse Airways experienced an unprecedented 28% increase in revenue while simultaneously becoming the most trusted airline in the United States. Yet Nathan's pride wasn't in the numbers. It was in the change. Walking through terminals now, he saw families of color seated comfortably in first class, greeted by crews trained to assist, not assume. He saw signage across gates displaying StarPulse's promise: every family belongs, respect first. It wasn't just branding, it was a commitment. And the world noticed the Passenger Dignity and Equity Act, inspired directly by Flight 392, became federal law 9 months after the incident and served as the foundation for a global aviation reform movement. Within 2 years, 22 countries had adopted variations of the Dignity Protocol, including Canada, the UK, Australia, and Japan. In the U.S., reported in-flight discrimination cases dropped 72% industry-wide, and a landmark FAA study revealed passenger satisfaction among families of color had reached 96% for the first time in history. For Mia Torres, life had changed completely. The once small travel vlogger who accidentally live-streamed history became a documentary filmmaker and activist. Her Sundance-winning documentary, Skyward Justice, chronicled the Flight 392 incident, the legislative battles, and the human stories behind the movement. The film was distributed globally and used as training material for crew education programs. During her acceptance speech, Mia teared up, saying, "I started as a witness, but this journey taught me that a single voice, amplified by millions, can change the course of history." Jordan Lee, the tech entrepreneur from Seat 1B, also found his calling. His detailed reports on hidden bias within airline hiring practices prompted a Justice Department investigation and industry-wide reforms. Today, Jordan leads an independent research firm tracking corporate accountability in aviation, ensuring airlines maintain the standards Flight 392 helped establish. As for Carla Reynolds, the story ended differently. After a high-profile trial, she was sentenced to 24 months in federal prison for passenger assault and endangering a minor. Upon release, she disappeared from the public eye. her case now used in crew training programs worldwide as a cautionary tale of power abused and empathy ignored. Captain Robert Hayes lost his pilot's license permanently and now speaks publicly about leadership failures, urging crews across the country to listen first, act later. Their stories served as stark reminders of why the reforms mattered. 2 years to the day after the incident, Nathan and Aisha returned to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, the same terminal where it all began. A plaque now stood at gate C-23, engraved with the words, "In honor of every passenger who ever felt unseen." Flight 392 sparked a movement that reminded the world, dignity flies with everyone. Standing before the plaque, Aisha held Caleb, now a playful toddler. As he reached curiously toward the engraved letters, Nathan placed his hand gently on her shoulder. For a moment, they stood in silence, letting the memory wash over them. Reporters stood at a respectful distance, cameras lowered. Understanding this wasn't about headlines anymore. It was about legacy. Later that evening, StarPulse unveiled its newest flagship aircraft, the Aisha Bennett Dreamliner, featuring redesigned interiors optimized for family-friendly comfort and inclusion. The ceremony drew international coverage, with aviation leaders from around the world in attendance. During his speech, Nathan addressed the crowd with measured pride. "This plane carries more than passengers," he said softly. "It carries a promise that no parent will ever fear judgment for comforting their child, that no traveler will ever feel unwelcome because of who they are, and that dignity will always come first." The applause was thunderous, but Aisha's quiet smile as she watched Caleb clap softly in her arms said more than words ever could. In classrooms, corporate seminars, and leadership programs across the world, Flight 392 became a case study, teaching that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply refuses to stand down. Harvard Business School included Nathan's response in its ethics curriculum, while medical schools highlighted Aisha's resilience under pressure as an example of composure in crisis. The movement transcended aviation. Companies in banking, hospitality, and retail began adopting versions of the Dignity Protocol, proving that one act of resistance can transform entire industries. For Aisha, the lesson was simple but profound. On a quiet night at home, she rocked Caleb to sleep, whispering softly, "You'll never remember the day this started, but the world will." Nathan stood at the doorway, watching them with a quiet smile, knowing their journey had reshaped more than a company. It had reshaped expectations, culture, and lives. Flight 392 began as a moment of humiliation. It ended as a global symbol of dignity, justice, and change. What started with a single slap became a promise carried by millions. Every family belongs, everywhere, and from that day forward, the skies truly became open for everyone. Thank you for watching this story. Please subscribe. Hit the like button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more powerful and inspiring stories.